I never thought I would tell this story out loud. For years, it lived only in the quiet corners of my mind, replaying itself in the late hours of the night when the house felt too big and the silence felt too heavy. But a few months ago, I woke up to a message that changed something in me. It wasn't a long message. It wasn't angry or warm or even personal. It was a photo, a single photo. My daughter standing in a white dress, smiling at a man I'd never met, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. And under it, just 4 words. Thought you should know. It took me a long time to understand why those words hurt more than anger ever could. Maybe because they were polite, distant, final, like someone closing a door softly instead of slamming it. My daughter didn't invite me to her wedding. She didn't want me there. And when I saw her in that dress, beautiful, grown, glowing in a way only a bride can glow, I realized something I had been refusing to admit for years. She had already built a life that didn't include me, and she had done it quietly. The truth is, I didn't cry when I saw the picture. A part of me wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, there was this slow, sinking feeling inside my chest, as if something was pressing down on me from the inside. It wasn't shock. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. It was the moment you finally faced something you've been avoiding. Something you knew was coming, but still prayed wouldn't happen. I spent that whole morning sitting at the kitchen table, holding my phone like it was something fragile. The sunlight was coming through the window, landing on the picture, and it made her dress look even brighter. I remember thinking she looked like her mother. There was always a softness in her face that I never quite understood. Something gentle, something patient. I used to think she got it from me, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe she got her patience by learning how to live without me. You might wonder what kind of father loses his daughter like that. What kind of man watches his own child drift away until she becomes a stranger wearing a wedding dress in a photo he didn't know was taken? I've asked myself that question thousands of times, and the answer is never simple. It never fits into one sentence. It never feels fair or complete. But I'm not telling this story to make myself look good. I'm not here to make excuses or rewrite what happened. I'm telling it because I need to. Because sometimes the things we bury are the things that rot us from the inside. And for the first time in a long time, I want to breathe. I want to tell you how a father loses his daughter. Not in one dramatic moment. Not in a fight or a betrayal that explodes like a firework. No, it happens slowly. It happens quietly. It happens through small choices, tiny mistakes, and little moments you don't realize matter until years later when you finally see what they added up to. When my daughter was born, I wasn't ready to be her father. I thought I was. I wanted to be. But wanting and being are 2 very different things. Back then, I told myself I needed to work harder, earn more, build a future for her. But I didn't see how much of the present I was losing in the process. And children, they don't remember the money. They don't remember the overtime or the sacrifices you make when they're asleep. They remember the moments you miss. And I missed a lot of them. But that's not the beginning. Not really. The beginning came long before the wedding photo. Long before the silence between us became a wall neither of us could climb. The beginning came in a small apartment, with a young couple who loved each other in the way young people do, wildly, imperfectly, and without any idea of how fragile life can be. Her mother and I, we didn't plan to build a broken family. We planned to build a happy one. We planned to stay together, to grow old, to watch our daughter graduate, fall in love, get married. We had dreams, ordinary dreams, simple dreams, the kind of dreams that seem almost guaranteed when you're young. But life doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't ask for your permission when it takes a hard turn. The cracks in our marriage didn't show up overnight. They grew slowly, like hairline fractures in glass. You don't see them until the pressure builds and something finally breaks. Sometimes it's a single argument. Sometimes it's the words you don't say. Sometimes it's the way you stop looking at each other the way you used to. For us, it was all of it. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I need to go back to the day everything truly shifted. Not the day of the wedding, no. That's the end of the story, not the beginning of the fall. The day everything changed was a rainy Thursday afternoon when my daughter was 13. A day that seemed unimportant at the time. A day I barely remember clearly. But she remembers it. She told me once, years later, that it was the day she stopped trusting me. I didn't know that then. I didn't know the weight of that moment until it was far too late. But I'll get there soon. Right now, I want you to understand how everything felt before the distance grew between us. I want you to see the world the way I saw it, as a tired man trying to hold a family together with the little strength he had left. When my daughter was young, she used to run to the door every time I came home from work. She'd jump into my arms and laugh like she had been waiting all day just for that moment. I didn't realize how fast those years were passing. I didn't realize how easily a child can forgive you for being tired, distracted, or late, until the day comes when they stop forgiving. I still remember her small arms around my neck. I still remember the weight of her, the softness of her curls, the way she pressed her face into my shoulder. I remember those things more clearly than anything else. They come back to me at night when the house is quiet. They come back to me now as I tell this story. And maybe that's why the wedding hurts so much. Because I still remember being her entire world. And that world doesn't include me anymore. But this isn't a story about guilt alone. It's not a story about blame, either. It's a story about what silence does to a family. What distance does to a heart. What regret does to a father. It's a story about the choices we make when we think we have endless time. And the choices we make when we realize time is running out. When I saw the wedding photo, something inside me broke in a quiet way. Not loudly. Not dramatically. More like a thin thread snapping under too much weight. And when it snapped, a thought came into my mind. One I had been avoiding for years. If I didn't change something now, I would die with this regret. That was the moment everything started shifting. That was the moment I decided I couldn't keep living the way I had been living. And that decision, though I didn't know it then, became the start of the most difficult and important journey of my life. A journey toward understanding, toward forgiveness, toward something I had almost given up on entirely. A journey back to myself. And maybe, if the world was kind enough, a journey back to my daughter. I think people expect a family to fall apart in one dramatic moment. A slammed door, a shouted argument, a confession that cuts the air in half. But that's not how it happened for us. Our downfall came quietly. It slipped into our home through small moments we didn't pay attention to. And by the time we realized how deep the cracks had grown, it felt like we were standing in the ruins of something we didn't even notice breaking. After I tell you this part of the story, you might think I should have known better. You might think I should have seen the warning signs, should have listened more carefully, looked more closely. But hindsight is cruel like that. It turns ordinary moments into big flashing signs, and it turns our blind spots into blame. Back then, I was working 2 jobs. One full-time, one part-time. I told myself I was doing it for my daughter, for our future, for the house we wanted to buy one day. But the truth is simpler and sadder. I was running, not from her, not from fatherhood, but from the kind of man I thought I was becoming. From the fear of failing, from the fear of not being enough. Working made me feel like I had control, like I had value, like I could prove something, not just to the world, but to myself. But every hour I spent working was an hour I wasn't spending with my daughter. And children don't measure love in paychecks or bills paid on time. They measure it in presence. They measure it in the sound of your footsteps coming through the door. They measure it in your attention, your patience, your time. And I didn't give her enough of that. Not even close. The day the distance started. She was 13, an age too young to carry disappointment, but old enough to start understanding its shape. That Thursday, it rained from morning till evening. The kind of rain that hangs low in the sky and makes everything feel heavier. I had promised that I would be at her school play. She wasn't the lead. She didn't even have many lines. But she had worked for weeks on a small moment in the second act. She practiced it at home, repeating her lines with this shy pride that made my heart warm in a way I can still remember. I told her I wouldn't miss it. I said it with confidence, with conviction, like someone who didn't even consider the possibility that life might interfere. But that afternoon, my supervisor asked if I could stay an extra 2 hours. Someone called out sick. There was a deadline. We needed to stock something before the weekend rush. It doesn't matter now what it was. Back then, it felt important. Now, I can't even remember the task. I stayed. I stayed because I thought she would understand. I stayed because I thought missing one small moment wouldn't matter. I stayed because I believed there would be 1,000 more chances to show her I cared. When I reached the school, the play was over. Parents were leaving with their children, some carrying flowers, some taking pictures, some laughing and hugging and celebrating. I walked through that crowd with my heart racing, looking for her face. She saw me before I saw her. She wasn't angry. That's what I remember most. She wasn't angry. She was hurt, quietly hurt, and quiet pain. That's the kind that lingers. She walked toward me with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair damp from the rain. Her eyes were soft but dim in a way I had never seen before. "Did you see it?" she asked. I opened my mouth and said the worst possible thing a father can say in a moment like that. I said, "I tried." Tried. A word that feels like effort but tastes like failure. She nodded once. Only once. And then she said something I wouldn't understand until years later. "It's okay, Dad. I knew you'd be busy." But it wasn't okay. And she didn't know. She learned. She learned to expect my absence. She learned to swallow her disappointment. She learned to stop asking. Looking back, I realized that was the moment the distance began to grow between us. Not a big distance at first, just a hairline crack. But cracks grow, especially when you ignore them. The slow drift. As she entered high school, life became noisier. Schedules filled up with sports, clubs, projects. She made new friends. She became more independent. And I kept working, telling myself I was doing the right thing. But sometimes, doing the right thing is just doing the thing that feels easiest. And sometimes the hardest thing is showing up when you're tired, overwhelmed, or scared you're failing. Her mother and I were struggling too. We argued more often. About money. About time. About responsibility. About the future. We tried not to argue in front of our daughter, but kids feel the tension even when they don't hear the words. Homes hold energy the same way walls hold heat. And ours felt colder with each passing year. My daughter stopped waiting at the door when I got home. She stopped asking if we could watch movies together. She stopped showing me her homework, her drawings, her small victories. At first, I thought it was normal teenage distance. Kids grow up. They build their own worlds. They drift a little. But this wasn't drifting. This was retreat. Gentle, quiet, deliberate. And I didn't stop it. I didn't know how. Maybe I didn't want to see the truth. When we lose someone slowly, we don't notice the small losses. We only notice the emptiness they leave behind. When her mother left, our marriage didn't survive that silent space either. We separated when our daughter was 15. There wasn't a dramatic showdown. No betrayal. No big event. Just exhaustion. Two people who stopped understanding each other. Two people holding too many unspoken hurts. When her mother left, I thought I could hold everything together on my own. I thought I could fix what was left. But by then, my daughter had already learned how to protect her heart. She built a quiet wall around herself. A wall made of disappointment, missed moments, and the kind of sadness children should never have to carry. She didn't yell. She didn't blame. She didn't say much at all. She just grew distant in a way that felt permanent. We lived in the same house, but it felt like we lived in different worlds. We talked, but only in short sentences. We ate dinner together, but the silence was heavy. We tried, both of us, but it always felt like walking through fog. Like reaching out for someone whose silhouette you can see, but whose hand you can't touch anymore. I didn't know how to fix it. And the longer I waited to try, the harder it became. Distance becomes habit. Silence becomes routine. And regret becomes a quiet companion. The final argument. The last real conversation we had before she left for college wasn't an argument in the traditional sense. There was no shouting. No accusations. Just honesty. Painful honesty. She said, "Dad, I love you, but I don't feel close to you. I don't know how to talk to you anymore." I stood there stunned. Not because I disagreed, but because she was brave enough to say out loud what I had been too afraid to face. I told her I would try. I told her I wanted to fix things. But she looked at me with these tired, sad eyes and said, "You always say you'll try. You never actually change." And maybe she was right. Maybe I had been promising and postponing so long that my words didn't mean anything anymore. She left for college 3 months later. And that's when the silence became real. Not the silence inside the house. The silence between us. The quiet years. Texts became short. Phone calls became rare. Visits became rushed. She was building a life. I was watching from the outside. And I kept telling myself, she'll come back when she's ready. She just needs space. She knows I love her. But sometimes love isn't enough when the bridge between two hearts isn't strong enough to carry the weight of the past. And then, the wedding photo. Years passed. Slowly at first. Then all at once. And one morning, my phone buzzed. A photo. My daughter. In a white dress. At her wedding. A day I knew nothing about. A moment I wasn't part of. And in that moment, everything I had ignored, postponed, or buried rose to the surface. Regret hit me harder than anything I've ever felt. Not because she got married. Not because she found happiness. But because she didn't want me there to see it. And that pain, deep, quiet, soul-level pain, is what pushed me toward the choice that changed everything. A choice I never expected to make. A choice that would reshape the rest of my life. But that part of the story comes later. For now, all you need to know is this. That photo didn't just show me a wedding. It showed me the years I lost. The moments I missed. The daughter I loved, but failed to keep close. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself, what kind of man do I want to be with the time I have left? When I think back to the days following the wedding photo, the world around me felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that sits in your chest and presses down on you when you least expect it. I would sit at the kitchen table in the mornings with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, staring at nothing, lost in thoughts I didn't know how to control. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just regret. It was the realization that something final had happened. A line had been drawn. A door had closed. A chapter had ended, and I hadn't even known we were reaching the last page. People say time heals, but sometimes time just makes the wound more familiar. It doesn't close it. It doesn't mend it. It just teaches you how to live with it. For years, I had been living with the slow, quiet ache of distance between me and my daughter. But the wedding photo, that ache suddenly sharpened. It became a truth I couldn't avoid anymore. A truth I could touch. A truth I couldn't lie to myself about. She had moved on without me, and the world didn't fall apart when she did. Her life went on. Her happiness continued. Her story unfolded beautifully, and I wasn't a character in it anymore. That was the breaking point. Not the wedding itself. Not the absence. Not even the photo. But the realization that she didn't need me the way I once believed she did. And maybe she hadn't needed me in a long time. I don't blame her for that. If anything, I blame myself. But blame isn't a solution. It's just a shadow that follows you when you walk toward the past. The real question I had to ask myself was simple. What now? What does a father do when the role he expected to play in his child's life disappears? What does a man do when the future he imagined no longer includes him the way he hoped it would? What does a human being do when regret becomes heavier than hope? For weeks, I carried those questions with me everywhere. Into my mornings. Into my evenings. Into my sleep. What little of it I managed to get. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not a friend. Not a coworker. Not even my sister, who usually sensed when something was wrong. I kept it inside. Locked up. Silent. It felt like admitting it out loud would make it too real. Like saying the words, "My daughter didn't want me at her wedding," would turn the ache into something permanent. Something I could never run from again. But pain has a way of finding its own voice, even when you try to silence it. And mine found me one evening in the most unexpected way. The night, everything shifted. It was a Thursday. Funny how Thursdays seem to matter in this story. How small, ordinary days can hold life-altering moments. I came home late from work, tired in the way that makes your bones feel heavy. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't just sit in your body, it sits in your spirit. The house was dark when I walked in. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I went straight to the living room and sat on the couch, still wearing my jacket, staring into the dimness. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the room to feel colder. Long enough for my thoughts to twist into knots I couldn't untangle. At some point, I reached for my phone. I told myself I was just checking the time. But the truth is, I opened the wedding photo again. For the 100th time. There she was, my daughter. A woman now. A stranger in a dress that should have been a memory I shared, not a moment I observed from the outside. Her smile was bright. Her eyes looked peaceful. She seemed happy. She seemed complete. And suddenly, something inside me broke. Not a loud break. Not a dramatic one. Just a quiet, painful shift, like a small piece of me finally giving up on holding itself together. I put the phone down. I leaned forward. And I whispered to myself, I can't keep living like this. Those 6 words changed everything. Not because they solved something, but because they acknowledged something. They acknowledged that I wasn't all right. That I wasn't coping. That I wasn't healing. That I wasn't living. I was just existing with regret wrapped around me like a heavy coat. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the couch thinking about the years behind me, the choices, the mistakes, the small failures that built the wall between me and my daughter. And then I thought about the years ahead, the years I still had left, the years that didn't need to look like the ones before them. That was the first night I allowed myself to consider something drastic. something I had never truly thought about before, something that scared me a little because it meant facing the person I had become and questioning whether I wanted to stay that way. A life-changing choice. A choice that wouldn't undo the past, but might change the future. A choice that required courage, something I hadn't felt in a long time. But that moment, that shift, it wasn't the end of the breaking point. It was only the beginning. Because the next morning, something happened that pushed me past the line. Something that made the choice no longer optional. Something that made everything feel urgent and immediate in a way nothing else had before. The unexpected phone call. The next day started like any other. I woke up tired. My mind still full. My chest still heavy. I went into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stood by the window watching the slow morning light stretch across the backyard. The world felt still. Too still. Then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Normally, I ignore calls like that. But something, instinct, maybe, told me to pick up. It was her mother. We hadn't spoken in a long time. Not out of anger. Just out of distance. We lived separate lives now, in separate towns, with separate worries. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm someone uses when they're trying not to make things worse. She said she had heard about the wedding. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped I was all right. I didn't know what to say. What do you say when the person who once knew you better than anyone now feels like a stranger offering polite condolences? I told her I was fine. Not because it was true, but because it was easier. But then she said something that made my heart stop. She said, "I think you should know something about her." My chest tightened. A father knows that tone. The tone of concern. The tone of something unspoken. The tone that tells you the next sentence will hurt. She took a breath. A long, slow breath. And then she said, "She doesn't hate you. She never did. But she's still hurt, and she doesn't know how to talk to you anymore." I closed my eyes. The words landed with a weight I wasn't prepared for. I had spent years assuming her silence meant anger, resentment, rejection. But now I realized her silence might have been confusion, fear, sadness, distance she didn't know how to bridge. And then her mother said something else. Something that shook me in a way nothing else had in years. "She wanted to invite you, you know? She almost did. But she didn't think you cared." Those words, they tore through me. They ripped open every regret, every memory, every missed moment. She didn't think I cared. My daughter lived her life believing her father didn't care enough to want to be there. Not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't say. Not because of what I did, but because of what I didn't do. And in that moment, I knew the truth. The distance between us wasn't built entirely on her pain. It was built on my silence too. We hung up after a short conversation. She wished me well. I thanked her for calling. But when the call ended, I didn't move for a long time. I stood by the window with the phone still in my hand, breathing slowly, feeling something inside me crumble. Because now it wasn't just regret. It was responsibility. It was the realization that I had played a bigger role in the distance than I wanted to admit. And that realization, sharp and painful and undeniable, became the final piece of the breaking point. The moment I knew something had to change. The moment I understood that the life I was living wasn't the life I wanted to keep living. The moment I realized that if I didn't make a drastic choice soon, the rest of my life would become a long echo of the same quiet loneliness I had been trying to ignore. I didn't want that future. Not anymore. And so, that morning, with the weight of the wedding photo still heavy in my chest and the truth from her mother still ringing in my ears, I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. A decision that would take me on a journey I never expected to take. A decision that was long overdue. That morning, after the call with her mother, I sat at the kitchen table for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't move much. I just stared out the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the floorboards, and tried to make sense of the storm inside me. I kept thinking about my daughter, about the wedding she had, about the years we had lost, about the moments I had promised to show up for but didn't. And then I realized something. I couldn't go on living like this. I couldn't keep drifting through life pretending that time heals all wounds. Because time hadn't healed mine. Time had only made me more aware of what I had lost. And if I didn't act now, I would spend the rest of my days in silence, haunted by regret, wondering what could have been. That's when I decided. Not slowly, not tentatively. I decided that I needed to change. Completely. And I needed to start immediately. Step 1, rebuilding myself. The first thing I realized was that I couldn't fix my relationship with my daughter until I fixed myself. I had been coasting through life, hiding behind work, and ignoring the parts of me that were broken. I was tired, lonely, and distant, and that version of myself couldn't be a father in the way she needed. So I began small. I started waking up earlier. I took walks in the morning to clear my head. I began to write down my thoughts, my regrets, my hopes. It wasn't organized. It wasn't perfect. It was just a start. I also took a hard look at my home. The place I thought would always feel like a family home suddenly felt empty. I cleaned it. I organized it. I filled it with light. Because the environment around you shapes how you feel, and I wanted my life to reflect the person I wanted to become. Step by step, day by day, I started to rebuild myself. Not for anyone else. Not for my daughter. For me. And as I changed, I noticed something I hadn't realized in years. The world didn't judge me for my past. I was allowed to try again. I was allowed to be better. And slowly, I began to feel hope. Step 2. Reaching out. After weeks of reflection, I knew it wasn't enough to just fix myself. I had to reach out. I wrote my daughter a letter. Not a long, dramatic letter. Not a letter blaming anyone or making excuses. Just a letter full of honesty. I told her I was sorry. I told her I had missed too much. I told her I wanted to be part of her life again, if she was willing. I didn't ask her to forgive me. I didn't demand a response. I just offered my heart. I mailed the letter and waited. And the waiting was the hardest part. Every day, I imagined her reading it. Every day, I worried she wouldn't respond. Every day, I feared that I had waited too long. But I knew I had to try. Step 3. Small steps toward connection. When she finally responded, it wasn't with anger. It wasn't with blame. It was cautious, polite, but warm enough to give me hope. She wrote that she had been hurt, yes, but she had also missed me in ways she didn't fully understand. She didn't know how to start talking to me again, but she wanted to try. And that, more than anything else, felt like a door opening. I didn't rush her. I didn't overwhelm her. I started with small things. Text messages, phone calls, sharing memories, just talking, listening. I realized that connection isn't built in a day. It isn't rebuilt in a week. It is slow, patient, gentle, and every small interaction felt like laying bricks in a bridge I hadn't even realized had collapsed. The first visit. Months later, she agreed to come see me. She arrived at my home on a sunny afternoon, carrying a backpack and a cautious smile. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know if I should hug her. I didn't know if I should speak first. But the moment she stepped through the door, something shifted. Not everything was fixed. Not all the hurt disappeared. But the air felt lighter. We talked for hours. About life. About work. About friends. About the things she hadn't told me she was struggling with in college. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer solutions. I just listened. And slowly, the silence that had grown between us began to shrink. The lessons I learned. That journey taught me many things. I learned that love isn't just about being present in the big moments. It's about being there in the small ones too. I learned that silence can be more damaging than anger. I learned that regret can be transformed into action if you're willing to try. I learned that a parent's love must be patient, persistent, and forgiving, not just of your child, but of yourself as well. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to try. No matter how far apart you've grown, no matter how much time has passed, no matter the mistakes you've made, if you are willing to be honest, to listen, and to act, you can build a bridge over even the deepest distance. A quiet victory. The first dinner we shared after reconnecting wasn't perfect. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with laughter every second. But it was real. It was quiet. It was filled with understanding and acceptance. And that, I realized, was enough. The life-changing decision I made wasn't about undoing the past. It wasn't about erasing mistakes. It was about stepping forward. It was about choosing to love, even when it felt hard, even when it felt painful. And that choice, the choice to act, to rebuild, to reconnect, is what saved me from a life weighed down by regret. It didn't change everything overnight, but it started something. And sometimes, starting is the most important thing you can do. The first months after my daughter returned to my life were both beautiful and fragile. It felt like holding a glass too close to the edge of a table. One wrong move, and it could shatter. We started small. Mornings with coffee, evenings with walks, conversations about memories we both still held on to. I noticed things I had forgotten. The way she laughs when she's nervous. The way her hair catches sunlight. The small quirks that make her unmistakably herself. And I realized something I hadn't known in years. I had missed these moments more than anything else. The big milestones, the birthdays, the graduations, were important, yes. But these everyday details, they were the life I had been absent from. The first real heart-to-heart. One evening, after we had spent the afternoon walking in the park, she turned to me. Her eyes were hesitant, her voice soft. "Dad, I want to know why. Why you weren't there. Why it felt like you didn't care." I swallowed hard. I didn't have a short answer. I didn't have a single explanation that could undo the years of absence. But I spoke honestly. I was scared, I told her. Scared I would fail. Scared I wasn't enough. Scared I would let you down. And I did. I let you down more than I can say. She listened quietly. No interruptions. No anger. Just eyes that reflected a mix of pain and understanding. "I know," she said finally. "I know you tried. But it still hurt." And it did. Hearing her say it out loud hurt more than the years of absence ever had. But it also felt like progress. Because finally, she wasn't hiding her feelings. And finally, I wasn't hiding mine. Learning to communicate. We both had to learn again how to talk to each other. Not just about feelings, but about life. About struggles. About successes. She told me about college, her fears, and her dreams. I told her about work, my mistakes, and what I had learned along the way. It was awkward sometimes. It was uncomfortable, but it was honest. And honesty, I realized, is the cornerstone of rebuilding trust. Small moments that meant everything. The small moments became the most important. A cup of tea shared quietly in the kitchen. A short walk in the neighborhood. A conversation about a book she loved, or a song that reminded her of something from her childhood. Each moment was a thread that slowly wove a new connection between us. I began to understand that love isn't always about grand gestures. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you've made mistakes in the past. And showing up consistently, with patience and humility, began to rebuild the bridge we had lost. The first laugh together. Months later, one afternoon, we were cooking together in my kitchen. We were making pasta, which neither of us was very good at. She dropped a piece of dough on the floor. I laughed. She laughed. It was the first time in years that I felt a genuine, unguarded laugh with her. The first time we were just father and daughter, not distance and regret. I remember thinking that day, this is what I had been missing. This is what mattered most. Facing the past. Even as we rebuilt, there were moments when the past intruded. I would catch myself thinking about the wedding, about all the years lost. And sometimes, she would bring up memories I had forgotten or moments that had hurt her deeply. And each time, I listened. I acknowledged her feelings. I didn't try to defend myself. I didn't try to explain them away. Because understanding doesn't come from excuses. It comes from empathy. And empathy, I realized, was what had been missing for so long. Slowly finding trust again. Trust doesn't return instantly. It comes slowly, day by day. Every shared moment, every honest conversation, every small gesture of care began to repair what had been broken. She started sharing her life with me again. Her successes, her fears, her little daily victories. And I shared mine too. The mistakes I had made, the lessons I had learned, the regrets that still haunted me. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were moving forward together. Not backward, not in the past, but forward, step by step, towards something new. A lesson in patience. I learned that rebuilding a relationship with a child you've lost touch with isn't about dramatic gestures. It's not about catching up in a single conversation or fixing years of absence overnight. It's about patience, consistency, gentle persistence, and most importantly, it's about humility. It's about recognizing that your child has grown into a person who has lived without you in ways you can't fully imagine, and respecting that growth while still offering your love. And slowly, as weeks turned into months, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that the bond we had lost could be rebuilt. Hope that my daughter would once again know she mattered to me. Hope that even the mistakes of the past could lead to something better. The turning point. The real turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, she invited me to meet her new friends. It wasn't a big deal to her, but for me, it felt monumental. It was proof that she wanted me in her life, not just as a parent, but as a friend. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories. And I realized, in that moment, that we had reached a new level. We weren't trying to repair the past anymore. We were building a new present. A present where mistakes were acknowledged, but they no longer controlled us. A present where love wasn't assumed, it was expressed. A present where connection was a choice, made every day, willingly and wholeheartedly. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a deep, quiet peace. It was one of those quiet Sunday afternoons when I realized just how far we had come. The sun streamed through the living room window, casting warm light across the floor. My daughter sat on the couch, her laptop open, half paying attention to whatever she was working on, and half listening to me as I talked about something trivial from my day at work. And yet, that trivial conversation felt monumental. Because a year ago, she wouldn't have shared that space with me like this. A year ago, silence would have hung between us like a heavy curtain. Now, it felt light, easy, almost natural. I found myself smiling without thinking about it. She glanced up from her screen, catching me staring. "Stop staring at me like that," she said, half teasing, half serious. I laughed, and something shifted. The laughter was real. It wasn't forced. It wasn't the polite, cautious kind that we'd shared in the early months. It was genuine. A moment where we could just be father and daughter again, revisiting the past together. A few weeks later, we decided to go through some old photo albums. At first, she hesitated. "Dad, do we really have to?" I nodded. "Yes. I want to remember. I want us to remember together." We started with her baby pictures. Tiny hands wrapped around my fingers. Curly hair that stuck up in funny ways. Her first steps, her first smile. She laughed at the awkward family portraits. I laughed too, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of guilt pressing down on me. Instead, I felt something lighter, connection. A thread between us being rewoven through memory. Then we came to pictures from her teenage years. Her expressions changed. Her eyes carried more weight. Some photos were awkward. Some captured moments of silence I had once taken for granted. We paused. I took a deep breath. And I admitted, honestly, what I had never said aloud. "I miss so much. I know I hurt you. And I am truly sorry for every single moment I wasn't there for you." She didn't reply immediately. She just looked at me, eyes glistening. Then she whispered, almost shyly, I know you tried in your way, even if it didn't feel like enough." And in that moment, something broke open. Not in a painful way, but in a healing way. Years of unspoken hurt began to unravel, slowly, gently. A conversation about forgiveness. Forgiveness wasn't instant. It didn't come as soon as she sat beside me that afternoon. It wasn't a single word. It was in the small acknowledgments, the tiny gestures, the honest conversations we shared over weeks and months. One evening, she said something I will never forget. "Dad, I forgive you. Not because everything is perfect, but because I want you in my life again." Her words weren't dramatic. They weren't loud, but they were heavier than anything I had ever heard. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It doesn't erase absence, but it allows love to breathe again. And that was what I needed most. Sharing new experiences. With forgiveness came new opportunities. We began creating memories together. We went to the park on warm afternoons. We cooked meals together, laughing over burnt edges and spilled sauce. We went to see movies she loved, and sometimes movies I loved. Each activity was simple. Each moment was small. And yet, these small moments carried enormous weight. I realized then that parenting isn't always about grand gestures. It's about consistency. It's about showing up, day after day, in ways both big and small. And it's about being willing to learn, to adapt, and to grow alongside your child. Learning from each other. I also learned that the child I had lost touch with was no longer the same little girl I remembered. She was stronger now, wiser now, her own person, with dreams, challenges, and boundaries. And I had to respect that. Sometimes she needed space. Sometimes she needed to make decisions without my input. Sometimes she needed to be herself fully, even if that meant I wasn't always part of the picture. Learning to step back without stepping away became an essential part of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. It required humility. It required patience. It required trust, both in her and in myself. The first true heartfelt conversation. One rainy afternoon, we sat together on the porch, listening to the sound of raindrops hitting the roof. She said something that surprised me. "Dad, I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to let you in." I paused. Her words hit me harder than any argument, any wedding photo, any silence from the past. Because I realized that the daughter I thought I had lost was still there, waiting, not for perfection, not for grand gestures, just for me to show up fully. I took her hand gently in mine. "Thank you," I whispered, "for giving me another chance, for letting me back in." We didn't cry. Not yet. We didn't need to. Because in that moment, the connection we had been rebuilding finally felt alive. Real. Whole. Small steps lead to big change. Over the next months, our relationship grew stronger. Not because everything suddenly became perfect. Not because past mistakes vanished. But because we were willing to show up. Every text, every call, every visit became a building block. And every shared laugh, every memory revisited, every moment of listening created a foundation we had never had before. We celebrated small victories. A shared dinner without awkward silences. A weekend outing, just the two of us. A spontaneous phone call to say, "I love you." These small victories became our new rhythm. And slowly, we began to rebuild the family we had once lost. A quiet triumph. Looking back, I realized the life-changing decision wasn't about fixing the past. It wasn't about attending her wedding. It wasn't about erasing years of absence. It was about choosing to act, choosing to love, choosing to be present, patient, and consistent. It was about being willing to face regret, acknowledge mistakes, and step into a new chapter, one defined not by guilt, but by intentional connection. And in that quiet triumph, I finally understood something fundamental. Love isn't measured by presence at one day in life. It's measured by the courage to show up for the rest of it. As the months passed, I realized that rebuilding a relationship isn't just about being physically present. It's about emotional presence. Being there when she's excited. Being there when she's struggling. Being there when she doesn't even say anything at all. I learned to notice the small things. The way she furrows her brow when she's thinking. The way her shoulders slump when she's tired. The small sigh she lets out when something frustrates her. These details mattered more than anything else, because they were windows into her world, her feelings, her life that I had missed for so long. I started to understand her perspective in ways I never had before. I thought I had been a good father, but I hadn't understood the depth of her feelings, the quiet ways my absence affected her. I had thought she was just angry, just distant, just a teenager growing up, but now I could see that she had been quietly coping with disappointment, learning resilience in ways that left scars even she didn't fully recognize. Seeing her, understanding her, listening without judgment, became more important than trying to explain myself, or justify the past, or rush toward closeness. I had to meet her where she was, and that required patience I had never known I possessed. Slowly, the silence between us changed. It didn't disappear overnight. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. It was the way a shadow moves when the sun shifts. The silence softened. It became spaces we could fill together. It became the quiet before laughter, before a shared memory, before a story told again. I realized that healing doesn't demand fanfare. It only demands presence, consistency, and willingness to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable wasn't easy. Admitting all the mistakes, all the lost moments, all the ways I had failed her, was heavy work. But every admission, every acknowledgement of regret, became a small stitch in a fragile, growing bond. We spent hours revisiting the past, not to dwell on it, but to acknowledge it. Looking through old photographs, I noticed things I had forgotten. The way her eyes sparkled when she was curious, the quiet determination she had even as a child, the warmth she radiated even when life around her was uncertain. I could see, in retrospect, that my absence had taught her independence, resilience, and strength, but at the same time, it had taken away the comfort of knowing her father was always there. That realization was both painful and motivating. I wanted to fill the gaps I could, not with grand gestures, but with steady presence. I began to notice the small victories, a smile I earned by listening, a shared joke, a conversation that lasted longer than a few minutes. These moments felt monumental. They weren't large events, they weren't celebrations or milestones, but they carried weight because they were genuine, shared, and built on trust slowly restored. I learned to savor these small victories, to recognize them as markers of progress, as proof that repair was possible even after years of distance. We also shared vulnerabilities. She spoke about her fears, her dreams, the things she hadn't told anyone, not even friends. And I shared mine. I told her about the moments I had been afraid, the mistakes I had made, the regrets I carried. The difference now was honesty without pretense. I wasn't hiding behind explanations or defenses. I wasn't avoiding responsibility. I was present, fully present, and so was she. There were setbacks, of course. Days when the past felt too heavy, when memories of absence and hurt made interactions awkward. Days when she pulled back slightly, or I felt unsure how to bridge the gap without overstepping. But even on those days, I reminded myself that repair is a process, not a single event. Every attempt to connect, every gentle reach, every patient moment was part of rebuilding a bridge that had once been broken. And slowly, trust returned. Not fully, not instantly, but it returned. She began to invite me into her world, to share experiences, to ask for advice, to talk about her life as an adult. And I listened, not trying to control, not trying to guide, not trying to fix what hadn't needed fixing. Just listening, just witnessing, just being present. That presence became the foundation for a relationship stronger than it had been before, not because nothing had gone wrong, but because we had learned to confront imperfection with patience and love. I also began to see her joy again, in ways I had missed before. Simple things. Laughing at a story she told, noticing her excitement about a new book, watching her interact with friends, seeing the kindness she showed to people around her. I realized that being part of these moments, witnessing her life, mattered more than any grand gestures I had imagined or planned in the past. Life's real connection exists in ordinary moments, not extraordinary ones. And in all of this, I learned about forgiveness in its quiet, patient form. She didn't forgive me with a single dramatic statement. She forgave me gradually, through conversation, through trust, through small acts of vulnerability and honesty. And I forgave myself in the same way, realizing that the past couldn't be undone, but the present could be shaped by intention, love, and effort. By the time a year had passed since our initial reconnection, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of wholeness, not perfect, not flawless, but genuine and alive. I had seen my daughter grow into a remarkable young woman, and I had learned how to be a father again, not the one I had been, not the one I had failed to be, but the one I could be now. The process had taught me patience, empathy, humility, and above all, the enduring power of love even after years of silence. The lessons I learned weren't always easy, and the healing wasn't always linear. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments when I questioned if it was too late. But step by step, conversation by conversation, shared experience by shared experience, we found our way back to each other. And the quiet, persistent effort became the true narrative of our journey. Not dramatic moments or grand gestures, but steady, deliberate love rebuilding what had been lost. I now understand that life rarely gives perfect second chances. But when it gives an opportunity to act with honesty, presence, and empathy, that opportunity can reshape everything. My daughter and I continue to grow together, slowly, gently, and with care. Our bond is stronger now because it was rebuilt consciously, thoughtfully, and with attention to both the past and the present. Even now, when I look back at the years we lost, I don't dwell on them with despair. I reflect on them with clarity, acknowledging mistakes, understanding consequences, and appreciating the resilience that both of us developed. And when I look at my daughter today, I see a young woman thriving, and I feel a profound sense of gratitude, not only for her presence, but for the lessons we learned together about patience, forgiveness, and the power of persistent love. Rebuilding what was broken has become the most important journey of my life. Not for recognition, not for accolades, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that love, effort, and time can heal even the deepest wounds, and that the bridge between a parent and child, once reconstructed with care, can hold more strength than the original ever did. Looking back now, I realize that life often teaches its hardest lessons quietly, without fanfare, without warning. The moments that shape us the most are not always the dramatic events we remember in vivid detail. Often, they are the small, quiet moments. The missed phone call, the hurried goodbye, the day we forget to show up. Those are the moments that leave marks, subtle but deep, marks that only time, awareness, and effort can begin to heal. I have learned that love is not measured by grand gestures or perfect timing. It is measured by presence, consistency, and intention. My daughter's wedding was not the day I failed her. It was simply the point at which I could no longer ignore the consequences of years of absence. Every missed moment before that added weight to her decision, and every small act of neglect became a quiet barrier between us. I cannot undo the past, but I have learned that I can shape the present and future if I am willing to act with honesty, humility, and dedication. Regret is a powerful teacher. It forces us to confront our shortcomings and face truths we might prefer to avoid. I spent years carrying the weight of my choices, of my silence, of my absence. That weight could have crushed me. Instead, I allowed it to guide me toward change. I realized that the responsibility to repair relationships begins with the willingness to take initiative, to be vulnerable, and to listen. And listening is more important than speaking, more important than defending oneself, more important than trying to justify the past. Listening is how we begin to understand and rebuild. Rebuilding a relationship with a child after years of distance is neither instant nor linear. It requires patience and humility. It requires understanding that your child is no longer the person you left behind. They are a fully formed individual with their own experiences, perspectives, and emotions. To reconnect, you must meet them where they are, respect their growth, and offer your love without expectation. And sometimes, you must accept that love will be expressed slowly, cautiously, and in small increments. Those increments, however, are powerful. They are the foundation for trust, for closeness, and for renewed connection. I have also learned that forgiveness is not always dramatic. It doesn't always come in sweeping gestures or heartfelt speeches. Often, it is quiet. It is revealed in small moments of acceptance, in willingness to engage, in recognition of effort over perfection. My daughter's forgiveness was not immediate. It came gradually, through conversations, shared experiences, and mutual vulnerability. And it was genuine. It allowed me to forgive myself as well, to acknowledge the mistakes I had made without being consumed by them, and to step fully into the role I wanted to play in her life now. The journey taught me that love is an active choice, not a passive feeling. It requires attention, effort, and courage. It requires showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the past feels heavy, and even when there is no immediate reward. Love is in the persistence, in the steady presence, in the willingness to face one's failures and try again. I have discovered that rebuilding a connection is as much about creating new memories as it is about understanding the old ones. We laugh together now in ways we never did before. We share small joys, simple meals, and quiet conversations that feel monumental. These moments, ordinary to the world, are extraordinary to me because they are genuine and shared. They are proof that even after years of absence, bridges can be rebuilt, hearts can be reopened, and love can grow stronger. Finally, I have learned that time is both precious and finite. We cannot take back the years we lost, nor can we undo mistakes. But we can act now. We can choose to prioritize presence over convenience, attention over distraction, connection over comfort. Life does not wait for perfect circumstances. The time to act is always now, because tomorrow is uncertain, and the moments we have with those we love are irreplaceable. And so, my life has changed, not because a single event defined it, but because I chose to act, to confront regret, to rebuild what was lost. I cannot claim perfection. I cannot claim I will never falter again. But I can say with certainty that I have learned to love intentionally, patiently, and deeply. Looking back, the most important lesson I have learned is this: love is a choice we make every day. It is reflected in small actions, quiet moments, and consistent presence. And if we are brave enough to act, even after failure, even after absence, even after silence, we can reconnect, rebuild, and create a relationship that is stronger, more honest, and more meaningful than we could have imagined. It is never too late to begin. The closer I got to my daughter, the more I realized that true emotional connection requires more than just presence. It requires openness, trust, and courage to be vulnerable. Each small interaction, whether it was a shared cup of coffee in the morning, a quiet walk in the evening, or simply listening to her talk about her day, became a turning point. They were small moments, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But to me, they were milestones, proof that the bridge between us was being rebuilt, brick by brick. One of the most significant turning points came during a long afternoon we spent together sorting through old keepsakes. I had not expected this to be emotional, but as we lifted dusty boxes and opened forgotten photo albums, the memories poured over us. There were photographs of her as a baby, smiling with no worry in the world, clumsy toddler videos, and snapshots from birthdays I had partially missed. She looked at them quietly, and I saw in her eyes the reflection of the years she had carried without me. It wasn't anger that I saw. It was something more complicated: longing, uncertainty, and the desire to reconnect in a safe space. I realized then that what I had assumed was rejection was really caution. She had been protecting herself, unsure if I could meet her emotionally. Understanding that changed everything. I didn't try to explain my absence or justify the past. Instead, I listened. I allowed her space to process, to express, to grieve the lost moments on her own terms. Another turning point occurred one evening when we shared a meal I had prepared myself. It wasn't perfect. The pasta was slightly overcooked, the sauce a little too salty, but she laughed and complimented it anyway. That simple act, her willingness to share a meal with me, to be present, to enjoy the moment despite imperfection, was more meaningful than any apology or grand gesture I could have offered. I realized that reconnection isn't about perfection. It's about showing up consistently, even imperfectly, and being willing to embrace vulnerability together. Through these experiences, I began to understand her fully as a young woman. She was no longer the child I remembered. She had grown, changed, and faced life in ways I could only admire. She had learned resilience, independence, and compassion. And yet, even with all the distance we had endured, she still wanted me in her life. That realization struck me deeply. It reminded me that love, even when tested by years of absence, can endure. It can be restored if approached with humility, patience, and consistency. There were difficult conversations as well. We talked about the missed milestones, the weddings, the graduations, the birthdays I hadn't been fully present for. She didn't shy away from expressing hurt, and I didn't shy away from acknowledging it. It was painful, but necessary. Each conversation felt like a stitch being sewn into a fabric we had once torn apart. And as uncomfortable as these moments were, they became proof that we were working through the past, together. One afternoon, she said something quietly that I will never forget. "I think I understand now that you were trying, even if it didn't feel like it." Her words were soft, almost hesitant, but they carried weight. I realized that she had been watching, noticing small gestures I had made without understanding their significance at the time. She had been observing, waiting for proof that my love was real and consistent. And in that moment, I knew that persistence had mattered more than perfection. The emotional closure didn't happen in a single instant. It didn't happen in a dramatic revelation. It happened gradually, through countless small moments, shared experiences, and honest conversations. I began to feel her trust growing, slowly, day by day. She started inviting me into her world in ways I had never imagined, sharing stories about friends, asking for advice, even seeking comfort during challenging moments. These were the signs I had waited for, signs that the relationship we had lost could be rebuilt. And through it all, I learned a profound lesson. Love that endures is love that is patient, humble, and resilient. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't demand instant resolution. It grows in the quiet spaces, the small gestures, the intentional acts of presence and empathy. My daughter and I found that love again, slowly, thoughtfully, and intentionally. And it was stronger because we had rebuilt it with intention and honesty, not simply assumed it would survive on its own. The final turning point, the moment when I truly felt the weight lift from both of us, came unexpectedly. We were sitting together on the porch, just talking about a mundane day, when she reached out and took my hand. No words were spoken. No explanations were necessary. In that silent gesture, I understood that the bond between us had been restored, not perfectly, but genuinely. The bridge was whole again, and this time, it was built on understanding, mutual respect, and authentic love. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. The life-changing decision I made to act, to reach out, to rebuild, to show up, wasn't about undoing the past. It was about shaping the present and future. The moments we shared from that day forward were richer, more meaningful, and filled with awareness of the value of time, trust, and connection. I came to understand that emotional closure is not about erasing hurt. It is about acknowledging it, sharing it, and choosing to move forward together. It is about building new memories while honoring the lessons of the past. And in that process, I discovered that even after years of distance, it is possible to reconnect with a child, to rebuild trust, and to create a relationship stronger than what existed before. Sitting here now, reflecting on everything, I understand something I didn't fully grasp when my daughter's wedding passed without me. Life doesn't wait for perfect timing. It doesn't pause for regrets or second thoughts. The moments we miss, whether by choice, by fear, or by mistake, accumulate quietly, forming distance between ourselves and the people we love most. But that distance, no matter how wide it feels, can be bridged. The bridge is built slowly, step by step, through consistent effort, presence, and honesty. I learned that love is not simply a feeling. It is a series of choices. Each day, I had to choose to show up. Each conversation, each small act of listening, each shared experience was a deliberate choice to rebuild what had been broken. I realized that forgiveness, both given and received, doesn't happen all at once. It is cultivated through patience, humility, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. My daughter's forgiveness was not a single moment. It was a process, a journey that reflected her understanding, courage, and capacity to hope again. Regret, I discovered, is not a life sentence. It is a teacher. It forces introspection and encourages action if we allow it. I could have remained paralyzed by guilt, letting the years of absence define our relationship forever. Instead, I chose to act. I chose to rebuild. And that choice transformed both of our lives. It reminded me that no matter how much time has passed, it is never too late to repair, to reconnect, and to create new, meaningful moments with the people we love. I also learned the importance of humility. Rebuilding a relationship is not about insisting on your own perspective or excusing past failures. It is about listening, acknowledging the hurt caused, and approaching each interaction with empathy and care. My daughter had grown in my absence, and she was no longer a child dependent on my protection or approval. Respecting her autonomy, while offering steady support and love, became the foundation of the relationship we now share. The small moments mattered more than I ever imagined. A shared meal, a quiet walk, a conversation about her day. These ordinary acts became extraordinary because they were genuine, intentional, and present. I realized that relationships are not defined solely by milestones or dramatic gestures. They are defined by consistency, patience, and the willingness to be fully present, even in the mundane moments of life. Looking back, I see now that the pain I felt, the heartbreak of being absent from my daughter's wedding, the years of silence, the loneliness, was necessary. It forced me to confront my mistakes, to reflect deeply on my role as a father, and to take action. Without that pain, I might never have rebuilt our bond with intention or courage. It reminded me that the challenges in our relationships, as painful as they are, can become catalysts for growth, understanding, and reconnection if we approach them with honesty and purpose. Today, my daughter and I share a relationship that is richer, stronger, and more meaningful than it has ever been. Not because the past was erased, not because mistakes were forgotten, but because we faced them together, communicated openly, and built something new from the pieces that remained. I have learned to cherish every conversation, every laugh, every shared experience, knowing that love is cultivated daily, and that the presence of a parent, fully engaged and intentionally loving, is priceless. The life-changing decision I made, to stop waiting, to stop blaming, and to act, was the turning point that shaped the future we now share. It taught me that action matters more than regret, that love is a deliberate choice, and that even after years of absence, reconnection is possible when approached with patience, humility, and consistent care. The moral of this journey is simple. It is never too late to reach out. It is never too late to rebuild. The bridges we think are lost can be restored with effort, empathy, and presence. Life is fleeting, and the moments we have with our loved ones are precious. Choosing to act, choosing to love intentionally, And choosing to be present can change not only our own lives, but the lives of those we hold most dear. I carry this lesson every day. I live it quietly, through my words, my actions, and my presence in my daughter's life. And in doing so, I have discovered a depth of connection, trust, and love that I thought I had lost forever. The past shaped me, the mistakes humbled me, and the decision to act transformed everything. And that, I have come to realize, is the most important lesson of all. Even now, months after we began truly reconnecting, I find myself reflecting on the lessons this journey has taught me. I think about how easily life can slip by when we assume there will always be tomorrow. I think about all the moments I missed, her first steps, her first day of school, the quiet conversations I should have had, and I feel the weight of those absences. But more importantly, I think about what I did afterward and what I chose to change. I realize that our relationships are fragile not because of the mistakes themselves, but because of an action. It is easy to drift, to let pride or fear keep us from reaching out, from admitting we were wrong, from showing up when it matters most. I learned that acknowledging mistakes openly, without excuse or defensiveness, can be one of the most powerful ways to reconnect. Admitting I had been absent, admitting I had hurt her, admitting I didn't always prioritize her. These admissions weren't easy, but they became the foundation for rebuilding trust. I also learned that love must be active. It is not enough to feel it quietly in your heart or to remember it silently when the person is gone. Love must be expressed in tangible ways. Time spent together, listening with patience, acknowledging feelings without judgment, supporting growth, celebrating victories, and comforting in moments of struggle. Love is reflected in actions, repeated daily, even when progress is slow and imperfect. I began to notice how the effort I put in, day after day, slowly transformed our relationship. Small things, like a phone call, a text, or sharing a memory, had a cumulative effect. They were reminders that I was present, that I cared, that I was committed to rebuilding the connection I had once neglected. The process taught me that patience and consistency matter far more than any grand gesture or apology. The slow accumulation of small, genuine acts of care is what creates real healing. Another lesson I took to heart is the power of empathy. I had to step back and consider her perspective, her experiences, and the emotions she carried from years of absence. She had grown, faced challenges, and learned resilience without me in ways I could not fully understand. My responsibility was not to erase the past, but to honor her growth, respect her autonomy, and offer my support unconditionally. This shift, from seeing her as a reflection of my own failures to seeing her as her own person, allowed our relationship to evolve in a healthy and meaningful way. I also learned about the quiet strength of forgiveness. Both giving and receiving forgiveness is rarely instantaneous. It takes time, trust, and repeated demonstration of care. Forgiveness does not erase pain, but it allows love to flourish. My daughter's willingness to forgive gradually, and my own ability to forgive myself, became central to rebuilding what we had lost. Through patience and persistence, the walls that years of absence had built slowly came down. And most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to try. Life may have given me years of mistakes, regrets, and missed opportunities, but I could choose to act now. The decision to step forward, to reach out, to rebuild, and to persist despite fear or uncertainty became the most transformative moment of my life. It changed not only my relationship with my daughter, but also my understanding of myself, my values, and the kind of father and person I want to be. I began to see patterns in life beyond just my relationship with her. I realized how easily people take time and presence for granted in all relationships, spouses, siblings, friends, parents. I saw how fear, pride, or past failures can quietly erode connections we value most. And I understood that active, intentional care is the only way to preserve them. You cannot assume love will survive neglect. It requires action, persistence, and respect. In reflecting on all of this, I feel grateful, not only for the chance to reconnect with my daughter, but for the lessons I've learned along the way. They have shaped me into a more attentive, compassionate, and intentional person. I am no longer just living through days. I am fully present in the moments that matter. I no longer take for granted the time I have with my loved ones. I understand the fragility of relationships and the power of love that is expressed through consistent, thoughtful action. This journey has also taught me the importance of hope. Even when the past is difficult, even when mistakes feel irreversible, even when silence and absence seem permanent, hope is powerful. Hope guided me to act. Hope encouraged me to keep trying, even when progress felt slow. And hope reminded me that relationships, though delicate, can heal and even flourish when approached with honesty, love, and patience. Now, sitting quietly in my home, I often reflect on the journey that brought my daughter and me back together. The absence, the distance, the years of missed milestones. They were painful, but they were also lessons I could not have learned any other way. They forced me to look inward, to confront my failures, and to make choices that required courage, humility, and persistence. The decision to act, to stop waiting, to stop making excuses, and to reach out, changed everything. It reshaped not only my relationship with her, but my understanding of love, family, and responsibility. I have come to understand that the true measure of a parent is not perfection, but presence. It is not the absence of mistakes, but the willingness to acknowledge them and take steps to make amends. It is in showing up consistently, in listening without judgment, in embracing vulnerability, and in allowing the other person's space to grow. My daughter and I found our way back to each other not because everything was easy, but because we chose honesty, patience, and care over pride, avoidance, and fear. The moments we now share are quiet, yet profound. We laugh over small things, reminisce about shared memories, and create new experiences together. Every conversation, every gesture, every shared meal or walk is infused with meaning because it represents a conscious choice to connect. And I realize now that love is not measured by the milestones we attend or the celebrations we share, but by the consistent effort to be there, to listen, and to care. I also learned that forgiveness is a process, not an event. My daughter's forgiveness was earned through actions, through consistency, through small demonstrations of love and accountability. And my forgiveness of myself was equally important. It allowed me to step fully into the role I wanted to play in her life without being paralyzed by past mistakes. Forgiveness does not erase hurt, but it allows growth, healing, and the possibility of deeper connection. Through this journey, I have come to value patience more than ever. Rebuilding trust and connection takes time, and there are no shortcuts. Every small moment, the quiet talks, the shared laughter, the acknowledgement of past hurts, becomes a brick in the foundation of a stronger, healthier relationship. The slow, deliberate work of presence and care is what ultimately creates lasting bonds. And finally, I have learned that it is never too late to act. No matter how many years have passed, no matter how deep the silence or distance, reaching out with sincerity, empathy, and effort can restore what was once thought lost. The life-changing choice I made was not about erasing the past or attending a wedding I had been excluded from. It was about taking responsibility, showing up fully, and committing to rebuilding a connection that mattered most. Today, our relationship is not defined by what was lost, but by what we have chosen to create together. It is defined by honesty, patience, trust, and love expressed through daily action. And in this, I have discovered a quiet joy that is deeper than any moment of recognition or celebration. It is the joy of knowing that even after mistakes, absence, and years of distance, love can endure, relationships can heal, and lives can be reshaped by the courage to act. The lesson I carry with me now is simple but profound. Cherish the people you love, act before it's too late, show up with intention, and let love guide your choices. Time is fleeting, and the moments we have with those we care about cannot be reclaimed once lost. But if we are brave enough to act, to listen, to forgive, and to rebuild, the bonds that matter most can be restored and strengthened, sometimes beyond what we thought possible. I do not take my daughter for granted anymore. I do not assume there will always be a tomorrow. Every conversation, every laugh, every shared moment is precious. And I am grateful, not only for her presence in my life now, but for the lessons we have learned together about resilience, forgiveness, patience, and the enduring power of love. Our story is not one of perfection, nor is it one without pain. It is a story of human fragility and courage, of mistakes confronted and bridges rebuilt, of love rediscovered and intentionally nurtured. And it is a reminder, for anyone listening, that no matter how far apart life has taken you from those you love, it is never too late to take the first step toward healing, connection, and a meaningful, shared future.